Welcome to episode 38 of Lost in Translation.
38
with Bobby Martin. We're almost at 40. I'm almost at 40 too. I'm like 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from that. It's scary.
Young. Still young.
Our guest today, if you grew up in Massachusetts in the late 90s, early 2000s, and you knew anything about hoops, you knew him. He was a legend. He was a high school All-American, which does not happen from the state of Massachusetts very often.
And you know what? I have to say that I'm extremely hyped about this because I got a fellow brother next to me.
That's right.
He is now the co-director for Rivals Elite, father of two, basketball guru, also martial artist, cold plunge extraordinaire, all-around good dude, and Massachusetts legend, Scott Hazelton. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
Excited to be here.
So, Scott, it's kind of a general question that I'll ask some people that I don't really ask this to like the young kids that we have in here because they don't know anything about anything, but people that have been around, that have had careers, that have had all that sort of stuff. At this point now, looking back on it, because we were talking beforehand, and your relationship with basketball has had a lot of chapters, and I think has evolved and changed many times over the years. Just what would you say about the sport of basketball and you and what it is to you at this point?
I mean, basketball to me it's a way of life. I've always said, it's part of me. So it's something that it's always there. It's always been there. My perspective on it has changed throughout the years. It's kind of like a love-hate relationship because I feel as though there's times when you really enjoy it, and then there's times that it's like the worst thing in the world for you, right? So when you're journeying through life and you're doing something every single day, it's just going to be like that. I mean, I think in hindsight now, as I'm older, I'm 42 years old, I look at the game of basketball as, I like to say this to my players, it's a kid's game. So I just try to have fun with it now. I think for a long time, it's, you have that like job mentality. It's a job, and you got to work to get better. And sometimes you put those expectations out, right? And you never quite can catch them because there's always something new to catch. And so now, looking back, what I do is I just have fun with it. I would say I'm just more present. That's the word, present. So I'm more present with the game. I'm not thinking about tomorrow. I'm not thinking about yesterday. When I'm in the gym, when I'm working with my kids, when I'm coaching, I'm just present. And I find when I'm present, I really enjoy it. So say that.
So as co-director of Rivals Elite, now you mentioned being present. Now you're present, and over the years, basketball, or maybe you can answer this for me. Has basketball changed, or has the culture around basketball changed?
I'd say, the culture around basketball's changed. I mean, that's like, I guess that's a natural, evolution in life with everything. I think the game is still exciting. I enjoy the game a lot. But there's definitely a lot of, changes of things that, we didn't have growing up. I mean, for instance, you look at the media coverage for kids now. You look at, the mixtapes. You look at the amount of teams that, opportunities to play. I mean, I think coming up when I didn't start playing AAU till I was in 9th grade. There was like 5 teams in Massachusetts.
Yep, we've talked about that.
I was just having this conversation with my son the other day. I'm just like,
how old's your son?
He's 12. So I have two. I have a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we're on our way to practice. And I'm telling him like, hey, listen, like, you're gonna have 4 hours in the gym right now, and it's up to you to maximize the amount of time you're in the gym. And I'm giving him the whole spiel. And I said, you know what, like, growing up, buddy, I said, like, he's in 6th grade. I'm like, I didn't play AAU till I was in 9th grade. He's like, well, how'd you get better? I just got better playing at the park. I had nobody showing me how to do drills or anything like that. It was kind of like all like, self-learned and self-taught. And that's just how I became good. So I said, take advantage of the opportunity that you have now. I think there's good and there's bad to that, because I feel like, when you're in sixth grade, if you're a fourth grader, there's 40 clubs you can go play for. There's, 100 trainers that are going to come train you and take your money and all that stuff, right? I still think there's something to be said about that education in the playground, where there's 20 kids down there, you're picking teams and you're playing to, 10 and losers off and, so on and so forth.
There's we've talked about this. I know we talked about this with Alvin Abreu when he was on. We talked about this with Gene Bain when he was on. Like, I do think that I agree that there's pros and there's cons. Because I remember when I was a kid, the travel teams, the AAU teams, stuff like that, there were so few. You would have kids not making teams or not even making, say, like Little League or their middle school team or something. And that was kind of it for them in the sport. And we've seen, science has shown us that you can't make an accurate projection of a kid until they go through puberty.
Absolutely.
So you lose some potentially really good players because they haven't peaked, or the way that aging works, they're at the young end of the pool facing kids that are almost a year old. So you lose a lot of kids from the sport because there aren't enough places for them to play. So it's good that there's more. But man, I remember you said, I remember you're a Somerville guy. I grew up in Cambridge. We'll talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
The pickup scene back in the day, whether it was
unbelievable.
Somerville, Cambridge, you used to go to the, we call them Patrick Ewing courts. It's Corporal Burns down by the river. Used to be packed with there were college dudes from BU, Harvard, Northeastern, even BC would come and waiting to get on the court.
Absolutely.
There's something to be said for pickup ball going against grown men when you're a high school kid. And it makes me so sad every summer. I get excited in the summer. My seasonal depression starts to go away. I feel better. But then I get outside and I see empty basketball court after empty basketball court. And I feel like the game loses something when no one's playing pickup anymore.
I agree. I mean, I can just, it's when you bring up those pickup games, I start getting chills because I can remember, and you're a Cambridge guy. I can remember, being in, the seventh grade and in the wintertime going and watching South Boston play against Cambridge Ranger Latin at UMass Boston and watching guys like Donnie Josephs and those guys, and then seeing those guys in the summertime down Trump Field in Somerville and getting get on the court with those guys. And it's game point and just an example. This is how you learn. Game point, come down the court, you make a pass, throw it through the air. It should have been a bounce pass. Pass gets picked off. Guy goes down the other end, scores, you're off. That's all I needed, because next time I'm going to throw a bounce back or I won't be on the court the next time, right? These guys are in my ear. So is that education? And just to go on your point about, I always say this, the best 12-year-old doesn't translate to be the best 15-year-old and so on and so forth. And I do agree with you that you do miss opportunities on kids, but I'll take it a step further. And this is one of my biggest problems with the culture now, is that if you were a kid when you're 12 years old and you didn't make your team back then, you had two options. You either quit or you go get better. And there's something to be said about that, but taking the option of I'm going to go get better. I'm going to come back next year better. I'm going to come back next year and make the team. Now it's if you don't make my team, you can go to this team. And if you don't make that team, you can go to that team. And so I feel like there's skips that are skipped. Excuse me. There's steps that are skipped, okay? Where it's kids now want that immediate gratification. And a lot of them don't want that work, right? They want that feeling of, okay, I made it.
Or that I made the team, but I'm not playing the role that I want, so I'm going to go find a team.
Right,
instead of working.
Right. Instead of working through it, getting through it, and along the way, I always say that just builds character, right? That toughens you up. It builds character. It builds fortitude and things like that. And I feel that's something that's really missed nowadays. And I also think it's missed with the parents too. I think a lot of parents don't want to, it's tough. I'm a parent. So like you don't want your kid to be in pain, but it's proven that it's good that they fail some. So
it goes back to what you said earlier. There are a couple of ways I think you can take this. One, with the kid, for them, if you're out there, I'm from Jersey, I'm not from, Massachusetts. I didn't see Cambridge, but I distinctly remember when I started out, I was always the one off the court, right? So at some point you have to become a willing learner, right? A willing listener. And I think one of the things that happens with the culture is the kids don't want to listen. They'll listen to their own opinion of things, but they won't listen to somebody who has been there. Now, I mean, Scott, you had reached the absolute highest level of high school basketball you can possibly get to.
Right.
And I'm sure that you still feel kids being reticent about accepting your advice because they figure they know better.
Right. I think it's tough to blame them, right? Because there's so many outside voices now. Like coming up, for me, it's like you had those old school coaches, and those were your coaches. What they said, that was how it was, right?
Yes.
And you didn't have, at least for me, like I didn't have parental involvement where like, my mom was coming to games or coming to practice or talking to my coach or something like that. So it's like your coach was really like that figure for you. And I feel like nowadays there's so many like outside voices of kids. You got parents that are like coaching from the stands. Then you have, you got their trainers, you got all types of things. You got their friends, and you have social media. I remember when I first started AAU, I met a guy, and he was a college baseball player at Boston College. Played at Boston College. Good dude. And he said to me, he's like, you can't forget that the game tells you how good you are. And I thought about that. He's like, the game tells you how good you are. He's like, it's not social media. It's not your friends. It's not your parents. Eventually, like when you play the game, you got to step inside the lines and you got to measure up. And that's going to be your measuring stick of how good you are. I think nowadays it's like, again, you the social media or all the stuff. It's my son. I think it's a regret. We just let him get Instagram. Okay, so he posts a couple videos, and he sends me a screenshot of someone who liked his video, and it was like Bam Adebayo. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
like what? But like now he's thinking like, like this guy, and who even knows if it's Bam? But it's like he liked my thing, and it's like so. My message to him is like, how about like going and actually doing the work, so one day you can be better than those guys.
Yeah.
But there's always that like immediate instant gratification that you can get from people. So I think like it's hard for a kid sometimes to know where you're coming from.
So that leads me to a question. How do you handle that? Because you understand what it takes to get there, and you're dealing with a kid who has another world presented to him by his parents, who can most of the time are the problem, his trainer. Yep. And now you're asking a kid to go from a me dynamic to a you, me, we dynamic. How do you balance that when you see what the issues are?
Well, I mean, one of the things I ask all my players to do is to get to know who you're playing for. Mm-hmm. So do your research on your coach. And that's not to say, and I don't say that about for accolades and things like that, because I could care less about that. But like, if you're playing for someone who's like high achieving, they got there through a lot of work, through a lot of like ups and downs, and probably more downs than there were ups. So at the end of the day, like when you don't grab that rebound when it's a 1 point game with 30 seconds left, and I'm taking you out of the game or I'm letting you hear it, you'll know why I'm yelling at you, because you'll know that I was high achieving. You'll know that's what was demanded of me. But in terms of the me society, it's like it's getting kids to believe in each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's getting the what's that I think Doc Rivers did it years ago with the teams.
Mbuchu or whatever it was. Yeah.
Like I am because we are.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe in that. I believe in that sentiment that everyone eats. Like you need everyone, unless you're like one of these guys that's just like so blessed and you're just way better than everybody.
Yeah.
Your success is contingent on like his success. And so like really getting kids to buy into that, you do that by getting them to trust you. You do that by being consistent. And you do that by just kind of relating that message every time you're with them. Some kids get it and some kids don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you hope eventually in life they do get it. I was hard-headed for a long time. So I get it. That comes with growth.
Tell me about, because we talked a little bit that you grew up in Somerville, and you had, what would you just say about childhood and where you grew up and how you grew up and how you came to find the game of basketball?
So I had how do we say this? Like I had a difficult but fun childhood. So I lived I split time between two places. So I lived in West Medford, Massachusetts, and I lived in Somerville, Mass. Now, two total different places, okay? Like West Medford, Massachusetts was like one of the first, Black middle-class communities ever like created in our country. So it's like I lived in a community of all African-American, like just doctors, lawyers, teachers, musicians, politicians, blue-collar workers. Like, we had a one park, Duggar Park, which was like the place to be, and we had a community center, and there was all types of programming, and it was just a wonderful place to live. But I also lived in a housing project in Somerville, Massachusetts. That was like at a time, my brother and I, we were the only kids of color in the project, and it was a different way of living. It was tough. You're fighting, you're scratching, you're clawing to survive. A lot of racial dynamics in there and things of that nature. So it was. I spent a lot of my childhood trying to fit in, trying to feel comfortable, and you never quite felt comfortable. I mean, I'm mixed racially, mom's, Irish, Italian, father, African American. So it was like in that time, growing up in the '80s in Massachusetts and around those times, like it was different. It was different.
So growing up in a position like that, what I'm hearing is, regardless of the circumstances that were presented to you, you had people around you who helped you figure it out.
Absolutely. I mean, it's strange because when you find success, right? So it's like, as I got older and found success, you go into this selfish way of thinking where it's like, I got myself here. And all of a sudden your story's like, I went through all this stuff and like, I made it. And then when you sit back and you're like, well, hold on a second. Like, you had people holding your hand the whole way, because like you would have never made it. So, for me, as a kid, especially as a kid, like I was very, very, like a very insecure kid. And I, again, like just trying to like find my way. And I found sports, and I found that I was good at them. Mm-hmm. And I found that, the better I got at sports, the more people liked me. Like I fit in. And that's really how I became, got introduced to this game. Basketball was a way for me when I was playing basketball to feel safe. and I could forget about all the other crap that was going on in my life, and I was like one of the best. So it was like I created my own little world around it.
So how old were you when you started to realize, like, man, I'm not encountering many people my age that can really hang with me on the court?
You know what's funny? Like, I never like had that type of confidence in myself. So it's always like I always like kind of like doubted myself to a point where it was like a game. You know, I'd like have that voice in your head that's like, you can't do that, or you're not good enough to do that. And then the other side of me is like, oh, I'm going to show you. So there was always like I always kind of had that doubt. So I never really thought like, no, these guys like, you know, they can't hang with me. It just like it was always like I had that will to just like I wanted to just be better and work. And I'm just like I got to work because like I got to prove to this person and I got to prove to this person and I got to do this. It was like I did it. It was a job. You know, I never really like enjoyed that thought like, oh, I'm the man. It was like, got to get better, got to keep going. Just wait.
No, it's a really tough dynamic, I think, for the kids to understand because tell me what you think about this. Now, as far as being one of the best athletes out there, I mean, like you just said, you're always in this constant battle with yourself. You know, can I do this? Or you're just saying, I want to compete. You don't necessarily have to think that you're the best, but you know that you want to go out there and compete.
Absolutely.
Right? Figure out where you are.
Absolutely.
So with the kids today, you just talked about the personal battle and the battle that's out there. Which one's harder?
Personal battle. I always say like the war, the fight that goes on like inside is always the toughest one anyway, because like I think that's the separator. When you get to a certain level where like the playing field is quote unquote like equal. So like whatever level you're at and like everyone's, you know, at the same type of level there or whatever. I say the thing that separates people is that personal battle, is that mental toughness, that extra will is the separator. So I always say like, because at the end of the day, it's like, I have to wake up with myself every morning. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to, and we all have that voice inside of us. Like, we wake up, it's like, all right, like, and that voice just starts talking. Like, what are we doing, right? So I always say, like, you know, the personal battle for sure is always the hardest. It's definitely been my fight for my, 42 years of living. So, for sure, personal.
Now, did you hoop in both Medford and Somerville growing up? And what was the difference in the scenes between the two?
Both scenes were like very vibrant. So like it was different. It was a different brand of ball, but like it was very good because at that time, like, you know, there was a lot of really, really good older kids in Somerville, like in their 20s and stuff like that. And, you know, I'd sneak on the court with these guys when I was like 12, 13 years old because I started to get a little taller, so I could sneak on the court with these guys. They thought I was older. And so that was kind of like my way in. It's like I just would hang around the courts. I'd be the first one there because I'd be working out. And then I just would kind of wait. You know, they need an extra guy. Like, yeah, I'll jump on. And like that's really how I proved myself. But I also, you know, was one of these guys that like I would ride my bike to Revere from Somerville. I would go to Everett. Okay, like I would go to Arlington. I would try to find any playground I could find to go play because that's really like the only way I could get good. You know, I did that even in high school. There wasn't many opportunities. There wasn't open gyms and there wasn't things of that nature. So the scenes were very different because the cultures were different. Okay, so you would, hooping in West Medford, you know, you get the trash talking and you get all the different type of stuff there. And then, you know, you go over to Somerville and it was like, like these guys want to fight.
I
like you can, like I've been punched in the face when I was a kid. Like you get
probably Trump Field.
Yeah, these guys want to fight. So it's like it's different. It was different from that perspective. But I would say like I was very fortunate to be able to live in both those cultures because I was introduced to like so many things that now at the time I was like kind of embarrassed of, but now I just embrace it. I embrace the differences that I have and the things that like I was able to take from both those cultures. So I'm very fortunate for that.
I remember Trump Field was the place that like they leave the lights on there. So like, you want to go. That was back before, like you said, open gyms and stuff like that. Like you want to get shots up at midnight, it's like go to Trump Field.
Trump Field.
Just watch your back the whole time.
I used to sit around and like they used to have a men's league down there, and sometimes you have these teams. Guys can't get out of work or something like that, and they only got five guys, and they're like, hey, so like I would do anything I could to like sneak on a court anywhere. That just, again, like in my mind, like at a young age, like I kind of correlated that with like getting better. It's like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to get better. Like that was just my mentality. I remember I went to my first Celtics game when I was in 8th grade and I was watching Ron Mercer like warm up. It was Ron Mercer or something. And they kept doing these like finger rolls. And I was like, damn, I can't do that. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to play in the NBA because I can't finger roll. So like the next day, I just go out there for like 15 hours and just finger roll until I can finger roll. Like that's just how I learned. That's how I learned how to play. So certain things like that.
What do you remember any old heads that gave you any specific advice or that helped you along as you were trying to grow once they saw you were serious?
Yeah, I mean, I was just fortunate enough as I got good, I got opportunities. Like I've met like just so many people like in my life that have helped me and guided me along the way. And
who's the best playground player that you've ever seen or played against?
Okay, now we talk about this journey, right? So there's different eras. Like
okay,
so
right.
Like growing up, I'd say like, I mean, there was a guy, Shannon Crooks. I don't know if you remember Shannon Crooks. I mean, he was
yes,
absolutely like, when I was in middle school and high school, I mean, he was a kid that we wanted to be like, in a regular game, Shannon was incredible in a regular high school game, but if you ever saw him in the park or you ever saw him playing in like the Boston Shootout, like those guys, like he was incredible. Like, oh man. But then as I got older, like I played in like Rucker Park and things like that. And
right.
I got a chance to play against Jamal Crawford and like that was just a whole other experience. Like he just was incredible. So, growing up in this area, we were fortunate where you could see a lot of guys and try to emulate them. There was a tournament that used to go on every single year. It was called the Boston Shootout.
Yep.
And that was the best tournament in the country. So growing up, I got to see guys like Stephon Marbury play. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember the last real good year of the shootout. I remember watching Baron Davis play against Ron Artest. And I just remember watching this game, and I'm saying to myself, like, if that's how good you have to be to go play Division I basketball, like I left and cried.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll never be that. Like these guys were just like they were just so good.
The shootout was amazing.
Every high level player, and we had some great ones come out of Massachusetts. I mean, we just always had good players out of Boston, and Boston's always had that identity. Like even to this day, like the kids are just tough. It's a different brand of basketball, tough kids, and just fortunate enough to grow up in this area.
Tell me about your high school kind of odyssey, because I know by the time you're an All-American, you're at Central Catholic.
Yeah.
But where did you start off, and how did things kind of happen?
Yeah, so like like I said, I mentioned earlier, like kind of had a, difficult childhood in certain ways, like family dynamics and stuff like that. So I just had like a lot of outside stuff going on in my life, but I ended up, funny story, like I remember coming home from school, and I'd always have these coaches, these high school coaches that come to my house, or they try to talk to my mom, or they try to, get something to get me to go to their school. And I don't want to mention any names. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but like I remember coming home from school one day, there was these two coaches there, and it was a private school, and they wanted me to go to the school, and I'm like, I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to go to my public school. And I remember saying like, hey, well, we can't afford it. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. It costs no money. I look over at my mom. She's like, yeah, you're going there. So I ended up at Mullen Catholic High School. And, my freshman year, I played varsity. I think it was averaging over 20 points a game in the Catholic Conference as a freshman, like doing really well. But I had no stability. Like I was taking 2 buses to school. I just was all over the place, like mentally everywhere. I was just hanging on when I was playing. After the season, started getting in trouble in school and things like that. So they're like, hey, man, this isn't working out. Like, you gotta go. So I ended up transferring back to Somerville High School for a half a year. And I think in a half a year, I think I went to school like 32 times. So I just never went to school. I just didn't want to be there. It was too big. And again, socially, it was like you walk into the cafeteria, it's like, you got everyone's just kind of sitting with their own. And I really didn't have anywhere to fit in. Like I didn't know where to sit. I didn't have any friends. It just wasn't something that was like very comfortable for me. So I didn't go to school. I just went to the courts and played. And I ended up meeting a guy, Vin Pastore, who, was him and his family. I mean, they saved my life. I had met him earlier on in the year, and I was playing AAU for him. He didn't quite know like all the stuff that was going on in my life, but once he started to figure it out, he started to help me. He started coming and making sure I was going to school and things like that. And after my freshman year at Somerville High School, I had all Fs. So I flunked. I had Fs. I have a report card that's got Fs across the board. And so now I'm stuck. I'm like, no private school is going to take me with these grades. They were trying to get me in a private school. Nobody would take me. And so Vin at the time was working at Central Catholic. And so it was like 4 days before school was going to start. He said, hey, listen, the principal said, she'll meet with you. I'm not sure they can do anything for you, but she'll meet with you. So I went over there and I met with the principal of Central Catholic, and like we just talked for like 2 hours. And literally like we didn't talk about basketball at all. She was talking to me about like what my interests are, and like she was really tapping into like who I was. What books did you read, and like what type of music do you like? And these are all things that like I was always like afraid to talk about growing up because I thought people would think like, oh, like he's corny, he's this, he's that. And so we started talking about my musical taste of my love of soul music, but also my love of rock music and things of that nature. And so she really like tapped into me.
What was her name?
Jeannie Burns.
Is she still teaching?
She's retired now, but was a great woman. She gave me an opportunity.
Shout out to Miss or Mrs. Mrs. Jeannie Burns. Job well done.
But she really tapped into me, and she was like, man, she's like, and she said like, I don't know the exact word, but she told me, she's like, like, you're a pretty special person. And like, growing up, like, again, I told you, like, I was very insecure. So like, no one ever called me special. You know what I mean? No one ever really took an interest in me outside of, hoops. And so, but I felt like she was really like tapping into like who I was. And she gave me an opportunity to go to Central Catholic. So I moved in with Vin and his family, and I went to Central Catholic. And a lot of people don't know this, but my sophomore year of high school, like I didn't play high school basketball. So back then you had to get a waiver to play. And I was one of 3 guys that year that technically went from a public school to a private school.
Right.
Even though I didn't play basketball at the public school, they had to sign off on my waiver, and they wouldn't sign off on it. Wow. They wouldn't do it.
So this is commonplace, man. My gosh, man.
So I was one of 3 guys, you know, and I was the only one that didn't get the waiver. So they didn't sign off on my stuff, and the other 2 guys were allowed to play, which was pretty discouraging to me because I had gone through this whole process of like these hearings, and I'm sitting in front of these like these strangers, and I have to tell them the most personal stuff that was going on in my life. Like at that time, like things that you don't want to talk about. And I'm sitting there as like a 14-year-old kid telling these people why I needed to make this switch and what was going on in my life, and they wouldn't let me play. So, you know, the best thing I could do is, you know, what Vin and those people told me, they're like, well, get your name in the paper for something else. They're like, go out for the track team. So I went out for the track team, and I became all-state in track as a sophomore and broke the record at my school for high jump and got my name in the paper for getting the honor roll. So it just was, you know, but it was that fuel though. I needed that fuel because I came back the next year and I just was it was the revenge tour for me. So I needed that. It was good. It was humbling.
So we've heard a lot of stories about, you hear about people that and I think a lot of kids, they reach that. You have an impasse, you have an obstacle, and so many kids, it's like the obstacle's there and they're just done. And you talked about that kind of fueling your fire in it.
Always.
Do you think that you would have been high school All-American had things just been easy from the time you got to Central Catholic?
Absolutely not. You know, like I needed that
challenge.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like it sounds a little crazy. Like I in life, I needed an obstacle because I needed something to like work for, and I needed something to beat. You know, it's that personal thing inside you. Okay, I'm going to beat this. And that's always been my mentality. Like, okay, like, how can I beat this? How can I do this? And because I love to challenge myself, even into my, you know, I'm 42. Like, I still to this day, like, I love challenging myself. Like, it makes me feel alive. And no, like, I'm a firm believer that things need to be hard. Like, you need to harden, you need to callous your brain, you need to callous your body if you want to be successful. Firm believer in it.
Now, that high school All-America game, I think there were 2 guys with local connections to Massachusetts. Yeah. Neil Fingleton, R.I.P., who was playing in Worcester.
Great dude.
7 foot, right?
7'6".
7'6". He's a big kid. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, he was really terrific person. But not from here, from England. But you were Somerville. That's as local as it gets. And the game was in Boston.
Right.
It was the Garden, right?
Yeah. Dude, what was that? What was that like?
Well, let me tell this story because like people don't know this. One of my I didn't say it's a regret because it's not now because I've learned to embrace it. But so I had broken my foot 8 weeks before that game. So I was out. I had missed the remainder of my high school season. I was in a cast, and I came back to play in that game in front of my home crowd, and I was awful. I played really bad, and so it was like I just watched that game for the first time last year.
Wow.
It was that sore of a subject for me.
Yes, I get it.
It was that sore of a subject for me that, like, I didn't even like talking about it because I felt like it was like my opportunity, my home crowd, the 17,000 people at the Fleet Center, and I was awful. And so that was something that, like, it bothered me for, like, years and years and years and years. Like, that McDonald's All-American stuff, like, I put those VHS tapes, like, away, like, they were in storage. And just last year, it was the first time I ever watched a game, and I'm like, you know what? Like, when you talk about being present, you talk about like just kind of thinking about things, and like I thought about all the things I had to do in life to get to that moment, and it was like, you know what? Like, I'm really proud of that, because like not a lot of people can say they stood on that floor. So yeah, but what an amazing experience. I always say, like, the McDonald's All-American, like the game itself, it's great, but it's all the stuff that, like, it's the practices that are phenomenal. Like, some of the best practices you'll see, because guys are like, I mean, guys are going at each other.
Yeah.
And that was still like and you'll get this, because like that was still at a time, like there's no social media, there's nothing.
There was Street and Smith.
Right.
There was Parade, you know.
Yes. So like, say like if Bobby Martin is 10th in the country and Scott Hazelton is 13th in the country, it's like, I don't like this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing that I could see is his name, his height, and where he's from.
Yeah.
And then there's like 3 opportunities that summer that I'm gonna either it's gonna be a 5-star camp, it's gonna be at ABCD or the Nike camp, or it's gonna be I'm gonna get one shot to play against this guy. And I gotta beat him. So that was the thing. So when we got together in these games, everybody was just trying to kill each other in practice. Like, that was the true spirit of like competition. And that's what I think nowadays it's like it's missing, because it's like I could talk to Bobby Martin now. I just have to hit him up on social media. Or I can see him, or I could collab with him. I can do this. Like, I can put a picture of him up and say, hey, go follow my boy Bobby. Like, we're cool. How can I want to chop his head off? Like, we're cool.
It is. I forget the pre-social media era sometimes, and it athletics specifically, like it's people would just be like a name, and you'd read something. You had to actually read the paper or find Street and Smith or find the magazines, and like, and they were these like people that you didn't even know what they were until you faced them. Even in Massachusetts, I remember in high school, Jeff Allison, same conference as us, was he was the number 7 draft pick for the Marlins. He was over 97 miles an hour in high school, and he was in Peabody. At Peabody and Cambridge, we're in the GBL, but like, it's not that far away.
Nope.
But like, I didn't have a car in high school. I never got out to It's like I saw him like twice in Revere Beach before we played him, and it's like this mythical person until you face them. And
That's right.
It's like you make yourself hate someone off a piece of paper.
Well, you just you said it. You used that word mythical, right? And so when you think of the word mythical, you think of imagination.
Yep.
And growing up and playing in the era that we played, you had to have really, really good imagination. You know, like I remember when I moved with Vin, I lived in Reading. They were playing hockey at the basketball courts. You know, so it was like there was no one for me to play with. So I had to be down there, but I'd be down there by myself for 9 hours just pretending I'm playing myself one-on-one. And I'm not only am I doing that, but it's like I'm reading Street and Smith magazine, and I'm reading about, Zach Randolph, who was a obviously like incredible player. But in my mind, I'm building up Zach Randolph as he's like 7'2" and 300 pounds, and he's this like. It's that imagination. It's that other thing I talked about. It's that obstacle. You create that obstacle. All right, I got to prepare for this guy. You know, and I think there's something to be said about that. I really do.
Well, you couldn't, when you develop that type of imagination, you can't walk away from it because it becomes real.
It's so real.
And I've got to get this. I remember in my McDonald's game, like you said, the practices were incredible. And I saw that, man, there's so many guys better than me. Jeez. This was Larry Johnson, Sean Higgins, Brian Williams, King Rice, Marcus Liberty, Dennis Scott. And I'm like, I'm not that good. Man, I got to get back in the gym because they were that good.
Absolutely.
And now I'm playing them in the gym. Right? That imagination, man. It's incredible. And I got my ass kicked every time.
Yeah.
The next step for you is college after that. And with everything that you went through and the obstacles, people would kind of say, like, when your high school career comes to an end, I think a lot of people, they don't think about the broken foot.
Yeah.
Kind of a storybook ending for high school. Not even allowed to play as a sophomore. academically all F's becomes, honor roll, becomes, track and field, becomes all American in basketball. You go to UConn. At that point, I think they've won one
national championship.
Yeah. And you go to UConn, but things don't really work out
Nope.
storybook way at UConn. What would you say about that decision and what happened at UConn?
So, I always, the University of Connecticut, I'll say this right now, was a phenomenal place. It was a phenomenal place for me at the time. Was it like, it was a necessity. It was necessary for me to go through what I went through there. I mean, because again, I broke my foot 2 more times when I was there. But not only that, it's like you're playing with guys like Karam Butler and Emeka Okafor and Ben Gordon, who's like just incredible players. And you're also playing for a guy like Jim Calhoun. Now, earlier on this podcast, I had said to, Bobby, like, know who you're playing for, right? And at the time, I was a stubborn knucklehead kid, and I didn't know who I was playing for. He's a savage. He is an absolute savage, and he will get you to do things on the floor that you don't think that you are capable of doing. But there's a certain type of mindset and a certain type of player that could play for that guy. And at the time, mentally, I just didn't have it. So I always say, like, when you get to that level and you're playing for guys like that that are high achieving, it's up to you to convince yourself you're good enough to play for them. If they have to convince you you're good enough, I just don't see it working. So again, I told you guys that I always had that like self-doubt and self-belief in myself. So I wasn't quite a believer. I was talented enough, plenty talented enough. But again, you're now at that playing field where everyone's talented. And what's gonna separate you? Go ahead, sorry, man.
So this just leads me to a follow-up question. So when did you figure out? Let me rephrase this. So we're always taught that it's about the team, it's about the team, it's about the team. But how much of this is about the player? And I'm not talking about selfishness in a negative context. I'm talking about it to where you have to be selfish enough to give everything you have just so your teammates are better. How did you distinguish between those two lines?
That took me a while to get, because, if you were asked me in my 20s, I wouldn't quite say it was about me, but I was playing the game and doing what I had to do to survive. Mm-hmm. But it was for my survival. Now, if you ask me at 42, it's a lot different. It's like, yes, you need to be selfish, but you need to be selfish to be the best version of you, so that we all can live, so that we all survive. I kind of like take that like military stance.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like when we're out a military guy and you're out in the field, it's like, I need you to be at the very best that you can be so we can get home safe.
Yeah.
And I think like that is absolutely imperative. But I also think now it's different, because there's a lot of talk now with mental health, and there's a lot of talk now with the mental aspects of the game. I mean, to be quite honest with you, and Wayne Alpert is the first guy I ever seen to do some type of like meditation type of talk. Like I remember, like, back when I was 27 years old and meeting him. And he's having me sit in front of him and like do this meditation thing. Like I thought he was crazy. I'm like, this is because no one ever talked about it, right? But at 42, I do it every day now.
I remember you telling me that. I remember you telling me that.
Well, I do it every day now. But I think part of being more than just part of being the best version of you is being stable in your mind and being in control of your emotions and things of that nature. I think now a lot of that stuff is being discussed, which I think is really, really important. But back when I was coming up, it's like we didn't talk about any of that stuff. It was like, hey, Don't matter if you're hurt physically, emotionally, mentally, like you need to get back on the horse and get riding. And that's what we did. So, it's just different now.
So where do you see, I'm looking at the contrast between the culture and what you were just speaking of as far as mental health is concerned, because to me, they're two conflicting ideas. Because the culture tells you that, or the culture, it may not tell you, but it can give you the idea that you have to be the best, right? That you need someone else's approval, right? As far as social media is concerned. But in the end, like you said, it's all about the player and how they see themselves. Correct. But in order to see yourself or to challenge yourself, you've got to be willing to be challenged by others who may not be in that area that you're in. Right? They could be your parents, maybe not your parents, but somebody else with a different viewpoint. So all those things conflict. How do you bring that together? Because the mental health issue is, I don't know, it involves, like you said, to me, and this is just my opinion on it, it involves some pain.
Absolutely.
But we don't want our kids to be hurt now.
Right. I think I do agree with it, very conflicting. Okay. But I also think that, everything with a grain of salt, everything in moderation.
Balance.
I think the problem now with our society, it's like, we're just like, a lot of us are just like, and a lot of people who are high achieving people as well. Like I have a word for it. They're holics. Like it's just nothing in moderation. It's like I'm going all in and I'm going all out. And I think that there is importance in that, but there's also importance with being grounded. And balance is such a beautiful word. I love that word, balance. It's something that, but I also think that is self-taught. Balance is self-taught. Being present is self-taught. So like I get what you're saying. Like if you need approval, like you need that challenge from other people, right? Take that, but be present in it.
So here's my question. So is it self-taught or is it self-perceived? Because, as we're younger, in my opinion, if we're younger, there are things that we don't see. It's like, you see the tip of an iceberg, but you don't see the mountain that's underneath. Thanks. So as you grew, you saw more of the mountain that was underneath where you said, you know what, I don't believe this shit.
Yep.
Right? No, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Well, it's perception. It's perception, and it's also being self-taught as well. It's also learning from your mistakes. So it's like I always say, like you trip through life. It's like, all right, like I'm going down this path, trip a couple times, get up. All right, don't do that again. Right. Let's go way here. Like, okay, this worked. Perfect. Yep. Trip again. Okay, I'm not gonna make that mistake again. That's just how it goes. Like that's like the natural progression of like maturity. And I think like.
Now, does that come with age or does that maturity come with perception?
Comes with experience.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I love it.
So it comes with the experiences that we go through, right? So it's like the more stuff you have to compare or to draw back on, right? Like, there's a couple different type of people. You're either going to learn from it or you're not. But it's all through experiences. And it's living life. That's life. And I think like that's something that's also lost in translation.
It is.
Like that, like you are going to go through stuff in life. Every day something's going to happen. It's just like, how are you going to deal with it?
So you made the decision to leave UConn, I think, after the first semester, your sophomore year.
It was technically my third year because I redshirted. Yeah, so I was there for 2.5 years.
Okay. And at the time, what went into that decision and what did you feel at the time leaving? And then now, hindsight, with all this experience you've gotten, what do you feel?
Yeah, so So at the time, it was like, all right, and here's where that like selfishness piece comes in. Because at that time, it's like going to college for me was like, I wasn't going to college for the experience. I was going to college for like, that was a stepping stone to become a professional basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was at UConn, like I wasn't present in college. It's like I played basketball. That's what I did. Wasn't really putting anything into school, anything like that. Like I just was playing basketball. And if things were going well in basketball, my life was going well. If things weren't going well, then my life was miserable. Okay? So my decision to leave was to go find somewhere where I could just go for a couple years and get some numbers and try to go be a professional basketball player. At the time, I had so many schools that were after me when I announced that I was transferring, and I wanted to go to UMass because I wanted to play with one of my former AAU teammates, Anthony Anderson.
I remember the rumor at the time of you going to UMass.
Well, here's the funny story about it, is like Steve Lapis was the coach at that time. And before that, he was at Villanova. And I had verbally committed to Villanova when I was like end of my, I don't know, was it to my junior year? Because at the time, Joe Jones was the assistant coach. Joe Jones was one of the first guys to ever recruit me.
Wow.
Like, I love Joe Jones. He was the first guy to ever recruit me. And he was working for Lapis at Villanova.
Shout out to Joe Jones.
Anyways, I didn't end up going to Villanova. And Lapis ends up at UMass. And when I went to go transfer to UMass, he wouldn't take me. He wouldn't take me. So at the time, URI had built this new facility, the Ryan Center, and so they had reached out to me. Assistant coach Desmond Oliver is a great guy. Tyrone Weeks, like they just had a really, really good staff, and so I went and watched the URI game at the Ryan Center, and they were playing the University of Pitt. University of Pitt was #1 in the country. The place was sold out.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm like, I'm coming here. I'm like,
now, who was at Pitt at that time?
Geez, I you know what? I don't know.
Was this Chevy Troutman and those guys, or I'm just trying to figure out who?
It might have been the leftover Troutman, because I played against Troutman and those guys when I was at UConn.
Okay, gotcha.
But I ended up going to
Julius Page.
Yeah, Julius. Love Julius. I played against him in high school as well. Mm-hmm. So Julius Page, Torrey was on that team.
Vonteego Cummings.
I don't know if he was on that team.
On the team. Okay, all right.
All I know is those Pittsburgh teams were some of the biggest and most physical teams I've ever seen in my life. They just were mean guys, and they were very, very good, man. So I ended up going to the University of Rhode Island, and I'll tell you what, like that was like we had talked about how people had like helped me along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like Coach Jim Barron, the coach that was there, he helped me in such a way that it was the first time that I really like recognized it. Like, okay, like you like really need this guy, or like you're gonna be nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And what this guy did for me was, I went to school there, and I wasn't going to class, and he found out I wasn't going to class. He called me into a meeting, and he read off my progress report, and sociology, 103.
Not very social. Not in class.
Mr. Hazelton has not come to class.
Right.
Spanish, whatever. We dropped Mr. Hazelton from the class, and Coach Barron was like this, like old school New York dude from like Brooklyn, white dude, and he had that like New York like accent, and almost like when he yelled at you, it was almost like that like. It was the disappointing father, and I didn't have a dad growing up, so it was like it was like that like if your dad's yelling at you, Like, that's how he made you feel. And he said, listen, he goes, you're off the team. You're not allowed to be in the locker room. You're not allowed to be around the team, anything like that. If you have anything lower than a C at the end of this semester, I'm taking your scholarship. So he goes, go downstairs, clean out your locker, and he goes, get out of my face. So I got to go down there, I got to clean out my locker, and now I have to go be and sit with myself. So now I have to say to myself, okay, he's kicked me out. What am I? I can't use the trainers, nothing. I was a regular student. So I'm like, what am I gonna do? Went to every single one of those teachers and cried. Listen, I'll do anything I can do to get back in this class, work my tail off to do, whatever. So I got that stuff. Basketball-wise, what was I gonna do? I was down in the rec center playing in the intramurals. So I'm playing with like the football players and stuff to keep in shape. And I'm going to the regular student fitness center to keep my body in shape. Long story short, I got the grades that I needed. I was back on the team, and they followed me to every class. So throughout that transition, these coaches were making sure I was in class. Mm-hmm. And that was like that stability that I needed, because it's like it became a habit. Now all of a sudden I'm getting myself up in the morning and I'm going to class, and it became a habit. And I always say, like, if I never met Jim Barron, like, I would have never got a degree in college. Like, forget the basketball stuff. Like, the basketball stuff was awesome. The Atlantic 10 was great. I had a great time there to do that, but like, I needed to meet Jim Barron as my progression to becoming a man. Mm-hmm. So that guy, I always say I owe him more than all this stuff that I have now is because of him.
It's awesome. Shout out Coach Barron.
I always wish I played for a coach like that.
Yeah, like he's never had a kid not graduate. He's got a 100% graduation rate of guys that have played for him. Look it up.
That's pretty amazing statistic.
Yeah, people don't tell those stories. He was building men.
Yeah.
So your senior year, you put up big numbers.
Yep. Yep.
Do you think that was another case of just like at Central Catholic? I mean, at Central Catholic, it was more kind of like someone screwed me, or powers out of my control screwed me.
Right.
You get that maturity level, different circumstance at URI. It's kind of like I kind of screwed myself to be in here, but still, was that another case of it fueling your fire and then coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think always, like, you want to build that up, that fire. Like, I've always been one of those guys that, like, I needed a cause. And that's why I always kind of played, like, I always said, like, with me, like, a lot of the times there wasn't, like, an off switch. So I would, like, I would play angry. I would play like, this guy's doubting me, this one's doing this. Like, I got to prove. And so sometimes, like, that actually does get you in trouble sometimes. But, my last year at URI was really like my first full year of college basketball, to be quite honest with you, because, like, my freshman year at UConn, I redshirted. I played and redshirted. My second year, I was, probably only played about 10 minutes a game. My third year, I had transferred, so I'm sitting out. When I came back for my junior year, I only had a half a year at URI, so I played a half a season. So that senior year was like my first full season of basketball. So it's like, I remember, like, talking to, like, a reporter, and they're like, man, like, you've improved so much. And I'm like, no, I haven't. Like, I'm just playing. And not only just playing, but, like, mentally, I was in a better space. Like, if you think about it, like, I'm going to class, I'm having like success outside of basketball. So I was in a better space mentally, and I played better.
I want to ask you in a second about pro ball, and I'm being conscious of everybody's time. I know, but the experiences pro ball are so different from college for so many people. But one question that's a little teeny question I have to ask, because I think he's a mutual. I think you do know him a little bit. I know him. I've known him really well. Awesome guy. He played against him in college once. He's a New Hampshire guy. Well, he's from Maine, but he played at UNH. Austin Ganley.
Yeah. Austin's a bucket.
Austin, white dude,
Bucket.
gangly, sports goggles.
Goggles, all that.
Dropped 29 on Jim came in for UNH to, was the XL Center or Gamble?
It was at Gamble. I remember the
He
game.
came in there, dropped 29 on them.
He gave us.
Calhoun the next year was telling, he was like, I've heard these stories from the reporters. He was like off the record, but kind of, he was like, there's no way I'm letting that white kid Austin Ganley drop 29 on us again. But just what do you remember about
that?
Austin?
So what you just said right there, all that is the true story. So yeah, we're playing at Gamble Pavilion, and like I had known Austin before that because we used to play in this summer league. There'd be a summer league up in Portsmouth, the Gaslight League, and the Connie Bean. And so Austin, about 6'6", 6'5", whatever. Could score, and like goofy looking white kid with goggles, and he came in and worked us like he did. Like he busted our ass, and we paid a heavy price in practice after that. But I'll tell you what, the next year, like we were ready.
I'd never seen this before. Calhoun went box one from the open against Ganley. He was like, he is not doing that.
I mean, you know what?
2 points the next
that's like the really cool thing about Jim Calhoun is like he is like an ultra competitor, and so like he instilled that in us. Like he took it personal. Like he would take it personal, and so trust me, that is a true story. Austin, yes. He did his thing, but the next year we weren't having it.
It was like he has not scored. I will say the 2 points he had in that game, though, he put Karan Butler on a poster.
Was it a dunk?
It was a dunk. Right on Karan's head.
Really? You know what? That doesn't surprise me because, like, if there's one guy that's going to take on a challenge and not care about it, it's Karan. So, like, he probably dunked on Karan, but Karan probably had 20 that game and 15 rebounds. So he wasn't worried about his.
Austin, for the Little America East Conference, best in-game dunker I've ever seen.
Yeah, he just was a really good player and, like, a really good dude.
So I appreciate you letting me go down memory lane on that one because he was my dad had played out at UMass Amherst and was had played with Dr. J out there, and I remember we saw Austin. My dad was just a fan of Blue Wolves, and he became a fan of Austin, and we saw him. I went to a game and I was like, "Who's the guy in the goggles?" He was like, "Just watch."
He was good.
And Austin came down and just dunked on someone's head.
And like the nicest guy too. Like nicest guy, but just go drop 30 on you.
So what happens after college? Because you went overseas, and I think a lot of people do not understand what pro hoops is like. You're a big deal. Oh, high school All-American.
Yeah.
And it's like once you get out, nobody over there cares.
Nobody cares. So I think like, that's kind of an interesting journey for me because it's like it always comes back to like just not present. So it's like I'm in Europe, I'm in Portugal, Luxembourg, Sweden. I'm in these beautiful countries. It's Europe. And all I can think about is like basketball. And not only just thinking about that, but just thinking about like my counterparts that are back here in the States playing and just comparing myself. Oh, like they're making this amount of money and I'm making this amount of money. And I just was like, I just had a jacked up attitude. I did my thing over there. I scored my points, did my thing, but like I never could quite fit in to the team system because I was at that period in my life, I had a very, very selfish way of thinking, and that wasn't the way they played. That wasn't the way they operated. It's like here in America, basketball practice was like gladiator school. It's not like that over there. They don't want you in your teammates' face, and they don't want you getting into crap like that. That's from my experience, it just wasn't like that. So, and they also played a very team-oriented brand of basketball. Like, I wanted to go out there and get 40 and win. But, like, at what expense? And that's what I couldn't understand. It was like I was doing that at the expense of my teammates. So I always kind of had like a tough time of fitting in over there. And then personally, like I just had I just went back to having no discipline because like they're paying you money, they're paying you cash, you're in this country, and like my job is to just play basketball. So then now all of a sudden like I'm going out and I'm doing all that type of things and I'm not focused and not being present. No structure and stability. Wasn't the right lifestyle for me at all. Some personal things went on. I had lost my brother. My brother had passed away, so I had that stuff going on back here at the States. But I think I started to realize that like maybe, and I don't know where this came from, because like I said, I always played the game of basketball, but there was something in my mind that was like telling me like, maybe this just isn't for you. One of my last professional basketball games overseas, again, like talk about one of those regrets or one of those things, and I don't mind talking about it, but like I quit at halftime. I got into trouble on the court and left the floor, went into the locker room, cried my eyes out, and like went back to my apartment and like went back home 2 days later, and quit. I came back home and I started substitute teaching, and I told my agent and all these people like, I'm done. And it's funny because this is how I met this guy. I got a call at like late May from my agent. He goes, hey, you want to go to this workout? I'm like, no, I'm not playing anymore. They're like, no, they just need, there's a group of guys from Korea coming to this gym and they need some guys to go against their players. Can you just go down there and scrimmage? I'm sitting around, I'm like looking at these students and stuff. I'm like, I had worked out, like I was fat, like I was like, whatever, like back, like, I'm like, you know what, like I'll go down there. I walk in this gym and I see Courtney Sims. Who's the other guy? Blair, the other big dude from Terrell Blair, who I just was watching on TV, and I see all these guys, and all of a sudden I'm like, bing, like that competition thing steps in.
Yeah.
And now I'm in the gym, I'm back in it. And I'm like, I want to be better than all these dudes. So like, yeah, man, like just went back to playing a little bit, but that's how I met this guy.
So when did you make the decision, and what are your next steps when you were officially like, all right, now I'm going to move on to the post-playing aspect of it? How long does that take after you get back in there and that fire gets reignited, and then what do you do next?
Well, real life hits. Got to make money. So it's like, do I want to keep going back overseas? Do I keep wanting to? I just needed a change. I knew that I loved the game of basketball, and I knew that I wanted to be around the game of basketball, but I found that I liked coaching it better. Like my first coaching gig was a middle school travel basketball town gig, and I loved it. And we were like good. We were like the best team in the league. I'm like, this is awesome. And I felt a joy in the game coaching that I didn't feel when I played. Didn't have that feeling. I was actually happy coaching. I'm not quite sure I was ever quite happy playing. In terms of like when it's college or high school, like I just wasn't sure I was ever quite happy. Because I wasn't playing the game. I wasn't present. Like I was playing the game, but I was playing it for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing it for approval. I was playing it for accolades. I wasn't just playing for me. And so it's just wasn't for me, man.
That's an amazing admission. I think that a lot of kids feel that way. They just as the parents live through their children.
Yep.
It's a lot of pressure on a kid. I'm not saying that in your case, this was your personal love for the game, but I think many kids feel that way. How do we help them, understand more about themselves so they can make those decisions, so they can follow their dreams, which it seems that you've done.
It's just tough because it's a grind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. Like anything you do in life, if you want to do it well, it's a grind. The thing that I find helpful now is finding joy in the assignment that I'm given now. And that's what kind of helps me be present. So it's like, all right, instead of comparing myself and instead of like, oh, well, I don't have this and this person has that, or like this person's doing this and I'm doing this. It's like, I'm going to be happy with what I'm doing now. I'm going to find enjoyment in the job that I was given now. And I think that the culture now, there's so many expectations that are placed, just not even on kids, just on everybody in general, because like everyone's life is like very visible now to a point. You know, everyone's highlight film is visible. So when you go on social media, everyone's highlight film is there. Your highlight in life is there, okay? And so I feel like it makes people put these expectations on themselves that a lot of the times, take it from me, it's like you put an expectation on yourself and you achieve that, it's never quite good enough because there's always something else to chase. Best thing I can say to kids now, and what I always say to them, is just be present. When it comes to the game of basketball, it's a kid's game. We all fell in love with this game playing as kids. It's a kid's game. It's like when I had skills and drills last night. I walk in the gym and I'm looking around and I'm seeing kids at hoops like playing 3-on-3 and 4-on-4, and I just let it go. Like good half hour. One of the parents is like, hey, we're going to work out. They are working out. They're having fun. There's no referee. There's no coach there to stop it. And there's no parent yelling at them. Those kids are playing. They're using their imagination. They're communicating with one another. They're having fun. That's what you need to find in whatever you do. It's tough. It's tough, but I think the people who do find that are the ones that generally are the most successful. But it is a grind. It's going to be tough.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming and joining us today, man. This was really awesome. I feel like this is one that we could definitely have a part 2 of. And
for sure.
Yeah.
Local, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. This is great. Appreciate you guys having me,
man. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks,
my
man.